subversion of expectation. Partly because this is spooky month and I want a spooky, partly because I still haven't finished A Jugglers Tale and would rather get to the end before I dare at a new one. So, what is the park? Well, picture a walking simulator. There we go. I have no hatred in my shriveled little heart for the walking simulator as a game type. I know some gamers use this as a derogatory term, however some of the best games I've ever played and loved have been walking simulators. I take a lot of time to talk up Dark Souls 3 and Fallout New Vegas, but I always overlook titles like Firewatch and What Remains of Edith Finch, two games I consider to be exemplars of the genre. A good walking simulator can bring across a story and make you feel engaged with its limited interactions. It knows when to shift the tone of the story to prevent the audience from getting bored to keep them engaged. Now you might be asking,
Phantus, you weird purple Anglo nutter, what has this got to do with spooky season?
well, you see, my dear viewer, the park desperately wants to be a horror game, and it even mimics one to a degree. In the same way I used to wear my mum's high heels when I was a toddler to pretend to be a grown-up. At least that was one of the things I did. The other was to pretend to eat shoes because I thought I was a dog, but that one is less relevant to this discussion. Though it does explain a lot about me mentally. The point is, the park looks like a horror game, but it isn't. It's a walking simulator. The park follows a woman who is looking for her son Callum in an amusement park at night. She is called Carol, I think. The kid runs back into the park to look for his Mr. Teddy, and we've got to chase him down. And what follows is a rather rapid descent into darkness and into the twisted mind of our protagonist. A protagonist I might mention that we know nothing about, so seeing her go mental carries no real weight. She goes from, oh my lovely son and I, oh us against the world, to fuck that little shit stain for being born, in about as long as it takes to demolish an anti-vaxxer argument. It's insane, none of this shit is really prompted. She just rambles at random as she explores the closed amusement park. As we explore, we see that the park has been closed for some time, following a serial killer doing a serial kill. The two stories don't seem to be connected, spoiler alert here. I am certain the mother killed her son because she's mentally unwell, but I can't prove anything. It's just that this has nothing to do with what is going on in the park itself. We do see it in the end, but the park just turned into her weirdly laid out house for some reason out of nowhere, so it's probably all in her head, God only knows. I don't call the park a horror game, I've made that clear, I call it a walking simulator. It's got some spooky themes, sure, yet it fails to do horror because it lacks pacing. Think of the most generic indie horror title you can, then minus the zombies you'll have naturally pictured, get rid of any other elements of danger, and you've got the park. You wander around a dark environment for a while, occasionally I see what I assume is meant to be a jump scare, then you're done. I have to say assume because, aside from one at the very end, I fell for none of them. I should mention right now that I don't think jump scares on their own are horror. I think you can compare jump scares in horror to fart jokes in comedy. You know, they can be an element of it, but they can't be the whole thing. By all means they can be there, but they shouldn't be the only string to your bow.
Oh, but Phantus,
Cries the game.
I'm also dark with occasional creepy things to look at.
Right, okay, but that's also not horror. That's not how that works. Just being in the dark isn't scary in a video game, at least I don't think so. Just seeing a slightly odd-looking thing isn't horror. Both of these things can contribute to horror, but they shouldn't be forced to be the only leg of your supposed horror. I've said horror so many times the word's starting to sound weird.
Oh, but I also let you pick up pieces of paper, and then I give you a useless flashlight at the end.
Weeps the game. Okay, but neither of those are horror. Again, that's not how it works. Do you know what makes a horror game scary? The park? Clearly not, because you are the park, which isn't scary. Horror to me is not being alone in a dark room with fuck all to do. At least not in a video game. In real life, if I was locked in a dark room, that'd be a different thing, but that's real life versus video games, and we can't really go into that debate right now. Horror requires decent setup and pacing to successfully achieve, and we need to know who the characters are before we can be invested in the events. We've got 2 minutes of the protagonist nattering to herself, right? That's not what I mean, though. It doesn't really help that she's so overly dramatic. Here, I'll play you some of her dialogue. And I have to warn you, she said some naughty words. It's not something I would ever do. Willies.
Treachery hides in thoughts. Treachery that lashes like a whip and scars our insides. The first time I saw Callum, my thoughts betrayed me. I looked down at this wrinkled, red, bawling thing and I thought, is that it? I know what you're going through. My daughter, Helen, she just gets some help. Help was a bolt of lightning. Help was 1,000 volts surging through my veins. Help is agony. I'd rather die. I wanted to scream. I'd rather you pulled your gun and shot me. The park is a collage of contradictions all of its own. Millions of people die every year in car crashes, and the park has little cars designed specifically to simulate that action. Hear the children scream with joy. In the sideshow alley, you can walk away with 15 cents worth of mass-produced Chinese teddy bears, while a grinning carny pockets your hard-earned $5.
Right, you see what I mean? This shit is bananas and it occurs after like 20 minutes of gameplay. Most of that 20 minutes was spent riding one of those weird slow water rides and listening to a story. Yeah, thanks to Park, I knew the story of Hansel and Gretel already. You see, I live in the world, so I've already heard it. Any chance you could do some gameplay instead? All of this is bad enough, but the thing that really kills it for me is that there's no failure state. Nothing that I saw anyway. And I've played this game twice now. There's no stalking monster to be afraid of, no traps or anything like that. You get brief moments when shit breaks in the environment around you, but that's no threat. These are just scripted story segments that allow you to proceed. Only after each one, your protagonist spends like 30 seconds recovering from the panic, and in this time I couldn't run or interact with anything, so I just had to walk slowly waiting for her to get her fucking bearings. And you really need to be running because the character's walk is so bloody slow. For a woman desperately searching for her kid, you'd think her default speed would at least be a power walk. By the end of the game, I was left with that feeling of disappointment that I'm so rarely privy to. Not because things meet my expectations, hell no, I learned to expect fuck all years ago is all that happened. Yet even by my already subterranean standards, the park is a fucking boring load of wank. I'd almost rather be playing Borderlands 2 again, and that game actually put me to sleep. The park is one of the most dull gaming experiences available to you today. I'm naturally anxious and suffer from paranoia. Usually in lame horror games, these are at least enough to keep me going, you know, there's a certain level of dread that my own mind provides. But that didn't work this time. I just wandered around an empty theme park for a while, looked at some paper, found a flashlight, then got a shit ending. I don't know if there are other endings, I really don't. I may have played the game twice, but I think I make the same decisions every time. I'm not sure if there are other choices to make, who knows. Maybe the events of the game will change if I go back. It takes less than an hour to beat a playthrough, so it wouldn't be an overly long time investment. I could do that. Or I could play around with Hero Forge some more. Yeah, I ended up doing that instead. At the end of the day, I'm here to enjoy myself, and the park offered nothing to me. The narrative wasn't exactly stimulating. The two monsters you see are just a dude in a theme park mascot and a discount Babadook. Maybe Mr. Babadook could have been scary if you hadn't got a really good look at it multiple times, which lets you see this lazy plasticine looking weirdo in all of his lacking glory. Maybe it was never intended to be a horror game. Maybe it was just meant to be a walking simulator with horror elements. If we judge it by that metric, it fares a little bit better, but it's hardly the royalty of the genre. As I said, I play and enjoy walking simulators a lot, and I don't personally use that name as a derogatory term. I enjoyed the straightforward narrative experiences. Had we gotten a look into the mum and Callum's relationship before we started finding them in the park, it might have fared a bit better. Maybe we can take the kid around, go on some rides with him first, so we can sort of build the relationship there, and then we have something to go off. At least then we get to see the characters being characters. So far all we get is, here is your kid, you are now invested. But no, we are not. Maybe if you're a parent, this shit works on you. I am not and it did not, so I can't be certain. So my overall view of the park is, it's a low-grade walking simulator with some horror themes here and there. It's short, boring, and forgettable. That's all there is to say. Well, I could also say the default controls are way too sensitive, or maybe I could even offer the limited praise I have to the voice acting, which was alright. Nothing amazing, but by this game's standards, it was pretty alright. I suppose I did just say those things. There you go, I found something to praise in the end. Thanks for watching, be sure to check out the other content available on the channel, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more content. You can also support the channel on Patreon from as little as £1 a month. Check out the link in the description. Thanks in advance, and we'll see you next time.